The story opens in Yokohama City, where a massive kaiju unexpectedly emerges, prompting the authorities to raise the alarm and instruct residents to evacuate. As the creature begins to wreak havoc across the city, people tune in to the news and watch as a helicopter opens fire on the beast, only for the attack to have no effect, leaving everyone increasingly concerned. However, an elite squad called the 3rd Division shows up to confront the kaiju, and their captain, Mina, takes the lead by firing her railgun, taking down the monster with a single shot. The crowd erupts in celebration, impressed by the 3rd Division's strength, as they manage to eliminate the kaiju without suffering a single casualty. A cleanup crew arrives to handle the aftermath, and we're introduced to a man named Kafka. While gathering a sample for the researchers, he notices his teammates attempting to lift one of the kaiju's organs. He urgently warns them to be cautious, but it suddenly bursts, spraying toxic blood that injures one of his colleagues. Kafka quickly assists the wounded man, reassuring him that he'll be okay. Kafka takes note of the kaiju's massive size, realizing that clearing it away will take a long time. His supervisor orders him to remove the intestines, an assignment he dreads due to how disgusting it is. When Kafka objects, the supervisor insists he has no choice, and his coworkers teasingly wish him luck, warning him about the awful stench inside. Once inside the creature, the sight of the intestines causes Kafka to throw up. But despite his revulsion, he forces himself to keep going and begins slicing through them to finish the task. Kafka heads home, but the stench of the kaiju's filth still lingers on him. As he watches the news, he sees Mina being praised for having taken down hundreds of kaiju despite her young age. It's revealed that Mina is his childhood friend, and that Kafka once dreamed of fighting kaiju alongside her, but now, he's nowhere close to her level. This realization leaves him feeling down, questioning how his life ended up this way. Still, he chooses to set those thoughts aside, reminding himself that by cleaning up kaiju remains, he's still contributing to society. The following day, Kafka arrives at work and meets his new colleague, Reno Ichikawa, who reveals his ambition to join the defense force. Another coworker, Tokuda, mentions that Kafka once shared the same dream, but eventually gave up. Hearing this, Reno looks down on Kafka, calling him pathetic and demanding to know why he quit. Kafka defends himself, saying he tried his hardest but still failed to get accepted. Unmoved, Reno declares he'll never give up like Kafka did and go outside, leaving Kafka to reflect on how defeated he must sound. They head back to the kaiju site, and Reno is assigned to handle the intestines, which makes Kafka cheer internally, thinking Reno is finally getting what he deserves. But his excitement fades when the supervisor tells him to team up with Reno, leaving Kafka frustrated and questioning why he always ends up with the messiest tasks. The supervisor, however, points out that Kafka has determination, even commenting that he might have done well in the defense force if he had passed the entrance exam. While they're on break, Kafka notices that Reno isn't eating, so he hands him a vitamin pack and urges him to drink it so he doesn't faint. Kafka jokes that he'll need to hold his nose to get it down, saying it's necessary for survival. When Reno refuses, Kafka makes him do it anyway, and then they team up, with Kafka assisting Reno with his tasks. That evening, as everyone gets ready to leave, Reno walks up to Kafka and thanks him for everything he's done. Kafka is surprised by this gesture, and Reno tells him there's still a chance to join the defense force. The age limit has been raised. He admits he could tell Kafka wasn't truly happy, especially when he spoke about giving up, and encourages him to follow his heart. Kafka is grateful for Reno's words, realizing he's someone with a kind and genuine heart. Just then, a kaiju emerges and nearly devours him, but Kafka pulls him to safety. Kafka orders him to run and call for backup, but he refuses to abandon Kafka. Frustrated, Kafka reminds him of his dream. He'll never make it into the defense force if he dies here. Convinced, he sprints away as Kafka lures the kaiju's attention, drawing it into pursuit. The creature chases him, trying to eat Kafka, but he dashes into a building and leaps out through a window to escape. The scene shifts to a flashback where Kafka finds Mina in tears. He tries to comfort her, and she reveals her sadness over the death of her cat. As they gaze at the wreckage of their city, they talk about their plans to enlist in the defense force. However, Kafka doubts her abilities and declares that he will become the stronger officer, vowing that they'll wipe out the Kaiju together. Back in the present, the Kaiju is still chasing Kafka, and he comes to terms with the fact that there's no way out. He has to fight, but the Kaiju shatters his leg and is just about to devour him when Reno suddenly returns. Kafka is confused, not understanding why Reno would come back. Reno tells him that if he can't even save a teammate, he has no business being in the defense force. Kafka is struck by this and feels ashamed, realizing he's too weak to protect anyone and doesn't have what it takes to be part of the defense force. Just as the Kaiju is about to kill them, a tiger suddenly intervenes, stopping its attack. At that moment, the soldiers unleash a barrage of gunfire, blasting the creature into pieces. Mina announces that the target has been eliminated, then instructs her team to move out, telling them they need to search the area for any additional Kaiju. That night, Kafka is in a hospital, reflecting on how incredible Mina is and feeling like he'll never be able to match her. Meanwhile, Reno is aware that he owes his life to Kafka, admiring him and believing Kafka should think about joining the defense force. Kafka thanks Reno for lifting his spirits and says he's made up his mind to apply. But just then, he spots a bizarre creature that says it's been searching for him, then suddenly lunges into his mouth, making Kafka fight against it in panic. Reno notices something's wrong and asks Kafka if he's alright, only to freeze in shock at what he sees. When Kafka catches his reflection in a mirror, realizes he's transformed into a Kaiju. They panic, but Kafka insists he's still in control of his mind and body. Before they can react, another patient spots them and calls for help. Knowing the authorities will soon come after Kafka, they have no choice but to flee. We shift to Mina, who's thinking about Kafka and the promise he made to always stay by her side, but she calls him a liar, feeling abandoned as she battles the Kaiju on her own. Suddenly, she gets a call informing her that a Kaiju has shown up at the hospital, and she vows to take it down. In a flashback, Mina laughs at Kafka, teasing him for sounding cheesy when he says he'll protect her if she ever gets scared. He begins to feel embarrassed, but then she genuinely thanks him, expressing how happy she is that they'll always be by each other's side. Back in the present, Mina gathers her team and informs them about the incident at the hospital. A news alert goes out, urging civilians to take shelter. Meanwhile, at the hospital, the old man is terrified, so Reno suggests they clear up the confusion and tells Kafka to smile. However, when Kafka tries, his smile only makes the man faint in fear.
That might actually make it worse.
Kafka quickly moves to assist him, but when he touches the wall, he accidentally destroys it, surprising him with his newfound power. The other patients are confused by the sudden explosion, and Reno realizes they must escape. Kafka tries to open the window, but ends up ripping it off entirely. Distressed by his uncontrollable strength, he begins to panic, but Reno insists they leave immediately. Meanwhile, Mina's squad is en route when she gets word that Kafka and Reno have fled the hospital. Back with the duo, Reno stares at Kafka's Kaiju-like transformation, questioning whether he's still the same person. Kafka admits he has no idea what's happening as his body grows even more monstrous. He eventually reverts to normal form but reveals another issue. He desperately needs to pee. Reno tells him to hold it, but Kafka loses control, leading Reno to nervously wonder where the urine will come from until it suddenly sprays from his nipples. Kafka feels embarrassed, but Reno urges him to keep going. As they move, Kafka questions whether he can still become part of the defense force in his current state. Reno doubts it, saying Kafka has turned into the very thing the force is meant to fight, and they'd likely shoot him on sight. Kafka is crushed by this, realizing he may never fulfill his dream of joining the defense force or keep the promise he made to Mina. Reno spots a restricted area and thinks it's the ideal spot to hide, but Kafka suddenly senses something approaching nearby. An explosion erupts, and reports confirm the appearance of another Kaiju, prompting Mina to split up her team. Reno figures this means fewer people will be chasing them, making it the perfect opportunity to stay out of sight. However, Kafka appears to hesitate as he watches the explosion unfold. A girl is in tears, desperate to free her trapped mother. She struggles to move the heavy rubble when a Kaiju bursts onto the scene, crashing through the building and looming over them, ready to strike. Just in time, Kafka delivers a powerful punch, sending the monster flying. Amazed by his own strength, he turns to comfort the frightened girl, but his attempt at a reassuring smile backfires, only scaring her more. After rescuing the mother, the kaiju reappears, forcing Kafka to order Reno to retreat. Gathering all his power, he evades the monster's strike and lands a crushing blow, obliterating it in a shower of blood, assuring them it's over. He notices the girl is still frightened, so he decides to leave. But as he turns to go, she finally speaks up, thanking him. The memory of Mina thanking him and his promise to stay by her side flashes through Kafka's mind. And in that moment, he realizes what he has to do. Reno urges him to leave before anyone else shows up, but Kafka refuses to run, declaring that he's not giving up. He needs to go and be there for Mina. At that moment, Mina arrives at the scene, trying to understand what happened. She questions the young girl about the kaiju, but the girl becomes frightened as she recalls the event. Mina reassures her, promising that they will eliminate all the kaiju. However, the girl pleads with her not to harm the good one, explaining that a kind kaiju had saved her mother. 3 months later, the cleaning crew is gathered around watching the news, where it's revealed that Kafka has been assigned the code name number 8. Reno comments that things have spiraled out of control, and it's revealed that Kafka is the first kaiju in history to ever escape from the defense force, now making him a target. Just then, the supervisor says there's mail for Kafka, and it turns out Reno passed the defense force exam. Reno checks Kafka's letter and realizes he passed too. Excited, he runs to tell Kafka, only to find him in his kaiju form. Reacting on instinct, Reno kicks him, forcing Kafka to revert to human form. Reno scolds him, warning that he's still a wanted fugitive and can't risk being seen like that. He hands over the letter, confused when Kafka doesn't share his excitement. Kafka explains he usually fails the second round, so he's not getting his hopes up yet. The second round turns out to be the practical exam, and Reno worries. How is Kafka supposed to hide his kaiju form with defense force officers watching? But Kafka refuses to back down. At 32, this is his final shot at joining the defense force, and he's not letting it slip away. On the day of the exam, they arrive at the defense force's Takakawa base alongside the other participants. Suddenly, a girl calls out to Kafka, teasing him by calling him old. He panics and quickly explains that he's only 32, but she brushes it off and tells him his car is blocking her spot. Kafka points out that there are plenty of open spaces, but the girl insists that 55 is her lucky number. Kafka considers giving the girl a lesson in manners, but she takes the initiative and acts on her own. Removing her jacket to reveal a combat suit, she effortlessly lifts their car with one hand and tosses it aside. Kafka panics over the wreckage. While Reno wonders who she is, the girl then introduces herself as Kikaru Shinomiya, proudly stating that her favorite hobby is killing kaiju. However, she comments on Kafka's scent, claiming he smells like a kaiju. Reno steps in to defend Kafka, explaining that they're just disposal workers. She looks down on them, insisting they don't belong there, but when she sees Kafka lift the car, she's shocked by his superhuman strength. Assuming he's also wearing a suit, Kafka tells her he plans to take the exam and insists she remember his name. Intrigued, she says things are about to get interesting and declares she'll prove she's better than him. After that, she heads inside, but Reno gets upset with Kafka for using his powers to lift the car. Kafka explains that he only transformed his hand so it wouldn't be obvious, but Reno says that's not the point and warns him against using his abilities. Kafka agrees. As they enter the building, Kafka reflects on how this is his final shot at joining the defense force, and he's fully committed to giving it his all. We discover that the second exam round consists of 2 sections, and the candidates are uncertain about their performance in the aptitude test. Because of this, they resolve to put maximum effort into the fitness test. However, once the test starts, Kafka finds himself struggling and realizes he's performing worse than he did previously. He wonders if his declining ability is due to his age. Kafka performs poorly, and Shinomiya taunts him since he had told her to remember his name. Yet his ranking is far below hers, pushing him into despair. However, Reno respects him for refusing to rely on his powers, and Kafka explains that he doesn't want to cheat when everyone else is giving their all to pass. Still, he can't help but wonder if using his abilities could have boosted his ranking. Reno then reveals that there's another reason behind his low performance. They begin discussing the leading candidates in the exam, with Reno informing Kafka about the second-ranked contender, Haruichi Izumo, who graduated at the top of his class from a prestigious university. The third-ranked candidate, Iharu Furuhashi, also graduated as valedictorian and is renowned for his remarkable strength. The top-ranked candidate, Aoi Kaguragi, was offered a position as an elite member of Japan's ground force but declined, choosing instead to join the defense force. Reno points out that there are plenty of strong candidates, so the competition will be fierce. Kafka responds by noting that all eyes are on Shinomiya, explaining that she's seen as a prodigy for graduating from a prestigious university at just 16. Because of her remarkable talent, everyone sees her as the one to beat. Kafka walks up to her and tells her she's incredible, but her bodyguards attack him, warning him not to touch her. She looks down on him, calling him pathetic, and vows to keep embarrassing him. Frustrated, Kafka swears he'll get his revenge, though deep down he worries he's going to fail the exam. Reno encourages him not to give up, pointing out that the next test might involve Kaiju corpse disposal, something they're both experienced in, so they feel like they might have the upper hand. The candidates proceed to the next zone, where they encounter Sashiro Hoshina, the vice captain of the 3rd Division, who informs them that their aptitude test is about to begin. He opens a gate, and Kafka is eager for Kaiju carcass disposal, but Sashiro clarifies that they will actually be killing Kaiju. Reno and Kafka aren't pleased to hear this, and when a Kaiju attempts to leave the gate, a barrier prevents it from passing. Shinomiya notices Kafka panicking and mocks him, while Sashiro clarifies that they'll be using combat suits for the test. Reno puts on his suit, which fits him flawlessly, and the system confirms it has finished scanning his body. Sashiro then explains that the suits are crafted from organic Kaiju material, enhancing the wearer with superhuman strength and abilities. Konomi, the operator, assesses the candidate's unleashed combat power and announces that Reno has only accessed 8% of his suit's capabilities, while the top performers have already surpassed 10%. Sashiro remarks that with proper training, they should eventually reach 20%. Furuhashi seems disheartened by his own results, but Sashiro is intrigued, explaining that only the most gifted recruits can unlock 10% of the suit's power without prior training. But Konomi announces that Shinomiya has accessed 46% of the suit's power, calling her the greatest talent in history since she's already operating at a squad leader's level. Reno looks at him and thinks he's pathetic, but Sashiro reassures him that he's doing fine and still has a chance to pass the test. Meanwhile, Kafka struggles, and Konomi reveals that his unleashed combat power is at 0%, the lowest ever recorded, causing Sashiro to burst out laughing, convinced that Kafka is destined to fail. Kafka is in disbelief, convinced something must be wrong with his suit, but Shinomiya suspects he's holding back his true power and is simply waiting for him to reveal it before the exam ends. Inside the combat zone, the candidates get ready for the final trial. Sashiro briefs them, explaining that their objective is to exterminate the Kaiju in the area while drones observe their performance. He also discloses that the suits are equipped with emergency shields, activated by examiners if a candidate faces mortal danger. However, he warns that triggering this safety measure will result in immediate disqualification from the exam. The test kicks off with Shinomiya swiftly leaping through the area, taking down every Kaiju in her way. Meanwhile, Kafka has a hard time moving, complaining that his weapon feels too heavy since his suit isn't boosting his strength. Reno starts to worry, unsure of what they should do, realizing they're not powerful enough to take on the Kaiju. Sashiro informs Kafka that Mina is observing them, which reminds Kafka of his promise to her. Recognizing this as his final opportunity to enter the defense force, he becomes resolute in succeeding. He suspects the presence of drones, reasoning that the examiners are testing how candidates handle tough scenarios. Realizing they don't have to defeat the kaiju alone, Reno concludes that their role is to assist the other participants instead. They spot Haruichi's team battling a kaiju, but its tough armor makes the fight difficult. Kafka, however, remembers its weakness from having handled its remains before. He throws a bomb, which disorients the kaiju. He explains that its hearing is extremely sensitive, so the blast overloads its senses. Kafka then directs Haruichi to target its stomach. Following his advice, their shots pierce through, causing the kaiju to explode. He thanks Kafka for the assist and goes off in search of another kaiju, believing he can pass the exam without relying on his powers. But out of nowhere, a kaiju attacks and slams him into a wall. The examiners see he's hurt and assume he can't keep fighting, so they get ready to activate his protective shield. However, he refuses to back down, determined to keep going because he knows Mina is watching. Just as the kaiju is about to devour him, it's suddenly blown to bits. Shinomiya shows up and tells him she can handle the area on her own, mocking him and calling him a loser. The other candidates notice she's heading straight for the main target, and they become determined to take it down before she does. But they quickly realize she's far stronger than they are. Assuming it's due to her high unleashed combat power, Kafka tries to stand despite his broken leg, and Sashiro tells him to give up, saying he's too hurt to go on. Doubt starts creeping in. Kafka wonders if it's time to quit, aware that he lacks any real talent and feels like failure is inevitable. Yet even with all that, he refuses to back down, unwilling to let go of his dream. The examiners are taken aback when he suddenly begins unlocking the power of his suit. Kafka manages to stand again, prompting Sashiro to let him keep going. Despite getting back up, Kafka continues to struggle and fears he might slow Reno down. But Reno insists they stick together. As Reno carries Kafka, Sashiro watches and laughs. They push forward to catch up with Shinomiya, and Reno tells Kafka to take care of the next attack. Meanwhile, Shinomiya effortlessly defeats the kaiju, moving so fast that no one has the chance to assist her. She reaches the Hanju, the final objective, and throws a grenade to stun it. Then, leaping between its jaws, she finishes it off with a single shot. As the kaiju collapses, the test concludes, and the drones are pulled back. Kafka is left stunned, unable to believe how quickly Shinomiya took it down. Mina is amazed by her power, and Sashiro points out that she finished the test so fast that no one else had time to fail. It's revealed that Shinomiya is the director's daughter. She hopes her performance earned her father's approval and gets ready to go mock Kafka again. But just then, another kaiju shows up, and she's abruptly shot. Meanwhile, Kafka starts worrying about their results, but the defeated kaiju suddenly rises again. Shinomiya is shown holding back her bleeding, and the kaiju is stunned that she's still able to move. However, Shinomiya is caught off guard when she hears it speak. She attempts to shoot, but the kaiju attacks first. The examiners hear her screams and pick up her erratic vital signs. Sashiro questions what's happening just as they spot the resurrected kaiju. Konomi observes that the creatures have grown even more powerful, assigning the Hanju a fortitude rating of 6.4. Sashiro believes an entire squad would be needed to defeat it, prompting Mina to activate all remote shields and order him to prepare for immediate deployment. The candidates are ordered to evacuate, but Shinomiya refuses to flee. If the Hanju isn't stopped, countless lives will be lost. Her suit helps seal her wounds, and she steels herself to keep fighting, determined to be flawless. Yet, in an instant, the Hanju crushes her. In a flashback, we see Shinomiya with her friend Risa, who congratulates her for getting the highest score. But when Risa's father comes to pick her up, Shinomiya is left behind. Her butler arrives and mentions that her father will be home today, and he believes he'll be proud of her achievement. Shinomiya looks hopeful, but when she gets home, her father shows no interest in her results, saying being at the top should be expected of her. He tells her that celebrating one victory will only lead to failure, insisting that she must be flawless for the sake of the country's future. Remembering his words, she pushes herself to keep fighting. Even as the Hanju keeps landing blows, she tries to get back on her feet.
I won't lose!
But the Hanju suddenly sprouts horns, and Konomi is shocked to see that it has regenerated its offensive Unirgen. The Hanju starts powering up an attack, and Sashiro questions whether they'll make it in time. Believing it's the end for her, Shinomiya silently apologizes to her father for not being perfect. Just as the Hanju is about to strike, Kafka appears out of nowhere and tells her she did well. She questions why he's there when a massive explosion erupts, but Kafka shields her from the blast. He then shifts into his kaiju form right before her eyes, declaring that he'll take care of everything. At the same time, the others are evacuating, with Kaguragi firing a flare to direct the crowd. Reno anxiously wonders if Kafka is safe. Earlier, they discover that the Hanju has revived, and Shinomiya is battling it by herself. Despite their evacuation orders, Kafka vanishes, making Reno fear he intends to transform. Now, in the present, Shinomiya is confused by the situation, while Kafka pleads with her not to reveal his secret. The Hanju charges up another attack, but Kafka casually swats it away and tells Shinomiya he'll explain everything once the battle's over. Konomi picks up a reading of his energy, but the explosion has disabled the cameras. She reports a fortitude level of 9.8, but Sashiro refuses to believe it, assuming the explosion must have messed with their systems, because a 9.8 would make him the most powerful kaiju ever recorded. Kafka realizes he's running out of time, so he goes all in, aiming to end it with one powerful punch. He charges at the Hanju and completely overpowers it, blasting it to pieces. Shinomiya watches in shock, wondering who he really is. Then Kafka suddenly dashes toward her and eliminates a kaiju that was right behind her. Kafka scolds her for putting herself at risk, but Reno shows up and immediately starts scolding him for transforming. The two begin arguing, but their fight is cut short when Shinomiya collapses. Sashiro and Mina arrive at the scene, trying to make sense of what happened. They receive a report confirming that Kafka and the others reached the shelter safely, but Sashiro doubts Shinomiya has the strength to be behind all of this. The situation reminds him of the incident from 3 months ago, and he starts to suspect there might be a connection. Later on, Kafka is recovering in the hospital, and Reno tells him that Shinomiya is doing well too, adding that she's receiving top-tier treatment. Kafka gets a little jealous hearing that, but then Mina suddenly shows up to thank them for saving Shinomiya. After expressing her gratitude, she leaves, and Kafka thinks about calling out to her but chooses to hold back until he earns his place as an officer. When Shinomiya regains consciousness, Sashiro is by her side. He informs her that all candidates made it out safely and expresses gratitude for her handling the Hanju. As she reflects on Kafka rescuing her, she is willing to protect his secret. The incident makes headlines, and the mysterious kaiju is stunned that no one was killed. Just then, he gets a call saying his break is over. He transforms into a human as he steps out of the bathroom, and it's revealed that he's the newest recruit in the cleaning squad. A while later, Kafka gets discharged from the hospital and goes back to work, but he's panicking over whether he passed the exam. He starts blaming Reno for messing up his chances, but their boss shows up and tells them they've both received letters. Kafka opens his, realizing it contains the exam results. A few days later, we see the successful candidates gathering in a hall, but the other candidates realize that Kafka isn't there. Thinking he must have failed, Shinomiya joins them, and we learn that she obtained the top score, so she's going to be handling the oath. Furuhashi asks Reno about Kafka, and he's about to answer the question, but the ceremony suddenly begins as Mina enters the hall. Shinomiya is chosen to speak on behalf of the group, and Mina announces that 27 candidates have passed, officially becoming officers in the defense force. Shinomiya pledges to carry out her responsibilities with full dedication, and Mina expresses her gratitude for saving everyone during the exam. However, she knows that Kafka was the true savior and questions why he's not present at the ceremony. Believing he earned a place among them, intrigued by his abilities, she hopes to meet him again. At that moment, Kafka suddenly joins them, surprising everyone. We learn that during the deliberation, the officials talked about Kafka's result, thinking he has no potential whatsoever, so they considered failing him. But Sashiro decides to accept him into his squad because he was able to support the other candidates during actual combat. Mina explains that he isn't included in the ceremony because he's going to be enrolled as a cadet. But Shinomiya is happy that he was able to enter the defense force. Mina expresses her gratitude that everyone chose to join the defense force, but she warns them that the kaiju are growing stronger, so their missions will be extremely dangerous. She admits there will likely be casualties, but assures them she'll do everything she can to support them and asks them to trust her. Kafka suddenly declares that he'll be right by her side, leaving everyone stunned and thinking he's lost his mind. She tells him he's disrespectful, so she decides to punish him, telling him to do 100 push-ups. Sashiro laughs, telling her to go easy on him, but she walks away, and Sashiro notes that she's smiling as Kafka starts doing the push-ups. Sashiro suspects that he's connected to the kaiju that was rated 9.8 because his vitals disappeared when it was detected. So Sashiro thinks he's hiding something and decides to monitor him. Kafka finds it difficult to finish his push-ups and only barely reaches 100, with everyone cheering him on, until Shinomiya cuts in, saying she needs to speak with him. They go to a diner later, where Kafka explains how he gained his powers. Leaving Shinomiya surprised, he considers informing the defense force, hoping they could reverse his condition, but she warns him against it. She argues that they would likely exploit him for military experiments, turning him into a weapon and pushing him to his death. So, he begs her to keep his powers a secret, and she agrees to this, reminding him that he saved her life, but she promises to kill him if he goes on a rampage. Later on, Reno is shown in the middle of training, landing his shots with incredible accuracy. A voice notes that he completed the drill in just over 2 minutes. With his combat power now at 18%, his improvement impresses everyone, and Furuhashi, determined to keep pace, throws himself into the exercise and manages to surpass Reno's time. As the voice mentions that his unleashed combat power is 20%, he tells Reno not to get too cocky, but they see Shinomiya completing the test as the voice reveals that she was able to destroy the targets in 1 minute, and her combat power is at 55%. She taunts them, saying she's better than them, and Haruichi thinks he'll never defeat her. But Kaguragi tells him he's falling behind, and he realizes that Kaguragi has surpassed his unleashed combat power, reaching 25%. Everyone hears Kafka struggling through his training, and it's revealed that he completed the drill in 6 minutes, but his combat power remains at just 1%. He proudly tells Shinomiya that at least he's no longer at 0%, but Sashiro mocks him, calling him pathetic and warning that he'll be kicked out in 3 months. Sashiro then orders the group to run laps around the perimeter, and Konomi observes that the competitive spirit among them is likely to push everyone to get better. After training, the group relaxes in the bath, with Kafka completely worn out. Furuhashi brags about his physique, but Reno dismisses it as unimpressive, sparking an argument between them. Kafka jumps in, claiming his muscles are bigger, but he accidentally loses control of his breathing, making his stomach puff out, earning laughter from Furuhashi. When Kaguragi steps in, revealing his incredibly toned body, the others quickly sink into the water in defeat, knowing they can't compete. Meanwhile, Shinomiya sees Mina in the laundry area, thinking she looks amazing. Shinomiya wonders why her combat power is off the charts, so she asks Mina about her training, and Mina tells Shinomiya to stand next to her, saying she will teach her the basics. The scene shifts back to Kafka, overhearing the others praise Mina and admit she was their inspiration for enlisting in the defense force. Reno gushes about her, calling her a real-life superhero. Kafka casually mentions that she's actually his childhood friend, leaving everyone shocked. Eager to hear more, they press him to tell the full story. The next day, they continue training together as Kafka struggles to keep up with the others. Later that night, we see Kafka staying up late, thinking he needs to study harder. Sashiro joins him, telling him to go to sleep, but he explains that he doesn't want to get fired. Sashiro realizes that Kafka is doing all this for Mina, having overheard their conversation earlier. Kafka admits he made a promise to fight alongside her, but Sashiro reminds him that he's the vice captain, meaning Kafka would have to take his position to make that happen. He bluntly tells Kafka that he'll never reach that rank and warns him not to grow too close to the other officers, since any of them could be killed on the battlefield. Just then, the alarm goes off, signaling a kaiju attack. Everyone quickly gets ready to deploy, and Sashiro turns to Kafka, telling him that his first mission is about to begin. Civilians are shown being evacuated as a Hanju emerges in the heart of the city, surrounded by smaller kaiju. To reduce damage to the surrounding area, the defense force decides to take down the Hanju in the central sector. Mina steps up, volunteering to eliminate it from a distance, and she wishes everyone good luck before heading out. The officers head into the city as Sashiro announces the start of their kaiju hunt. Shinomiya remains in disbelief that Kafka is truly kaiju number 8, but is eager to witness his abilities in action. Meanwhile, Japan's ground force positions their artillery for an attack. As Sashiro's squad spots the Hanju, he instructs them to leave the massive kaiju to Mina while they concentrate on wiping out the smaller ones it spawns, preventing any from escaping the combat zone. He orders everyone to prepare for battle, and they get fired up as Sashiro tells them to have fun. Kafka knows that he needs to prove himself because he could end up getting fired if he doesn't perform well, but he tells Reno that he's excited for the mission. A swarm of kaiju shows up, prompting Shinomiya and the others to rush into battle, while Kafka carefully makes his way down the building. Meanwhile, a helicopter arrives, signaling that Mina has reached her sniping position. Konomi instructs the ground team to lure the Hanju toward the central sector, so they begin their assault, firing multiple rockets. But the attacks do nothing, and the Hanju starts advancing. Sashiro tells the new recruits to show him what they're made of, and Kafka tries to unleash his suit's power, but a kaiju blows him away. Shinomiya advises him to stay back because he's still at 1%. The experienced officers look down on the rookies, telling them not to get in the way, and they mention that nobody knows about the enemy's weak spots. Shinomiya unleashes a barrage of attacks, obliterating the kaiju with precision, leaving her senior officers stunned by her prowess. Meanwhile, Furuhashi battles alongside Reno, taunting him to keep pace. But when he notices Reno single-handedly taking down a kaiju, he's shocked. Reno reveals he's using specialized freezing rounds, explaining that the icy ammunition suits his fighting style by slowing enemies mid-combat. The seniors are impressed with the new recruits because they're eliminating the kaijus by themselves, and the squad leader Nakano explains that the batch is filled with talented members. Kaguragi and Haruichi are competing against each other, wanting to see who gets more kills, as Nakano notes that they're complete opposites but thinks they're both attractive. She's impressed by the rookies, as they're surpassing even the veteran officers. Konomi updates her, noting that Reno and Furuhashi are leading the charge. Meanwhile, Kafka feels frustrated by his lack of contribution and searches for a way to make a difference. Spotting a fallen kaiju, he considers examining it to identify potential weaknesses. He begins analyzing the creature, noticing that its core isn't in the usual spot. It's located at the base of the neck. He quickly reports this to Sashiro, recommending that the officers target it from the side. He also points out that the kaiju have reproductive organs and warns Sashiro that if those are damaged, they could end up spawning new kaiju. Sashiro thanks him for the information, and Konomi shares this with everyone. Kafka realizes that he was able to help the defense force, thinking he might be able to fight by Mina's side. But he sees a massive explosion, and we see that the ground force is continuing to pressure the Hanju, but it has already reached the central sector, so they decide to retreat. The defense force targets the Hanju's legs in an effort to stop its movement, while Mina locks onto her target and begins charging her railgun, boosting her unleashed combat power to 96%. Sashiro tells Kafka to pay attention as Mina fires, unleashing a powerful blast that tears a huge hole through the Hanju's body. Kafka can't believe how powerful she is, and Sashiro tells him he's nowhere near her level. She fires another round, destroying the Hanju's head, and it crashes to the ground, but she keeps firing her weapon, and Konomi tells her it's already dead. But she doesn't care and continues to obliterate its body. Kafka is in awe of her power, but Sashiro questions whether he's abandoned his ambitions, stating he'll never be on her level. When Kafka asks if Sashiro himself can rival her strength, he admits he can't, explaining that his expertise lies in handling smaller kaiju instead. Out of nowhere, a kaiju lunges at Sashiro from behind, but in a flash, he cuts it down before Kafka can even process what happened. Stunned by his speed, Kafka realizes he couldn't even track Sashiro's movements. Sashiro clarifies that swords are his specialty, adding that the captain